Welcome back to Simple Stories, Smart Kids, the place where tales take off, sometimes literally. Today's story is all about a flying suitcase, a princess in a tall tower, and a young man who may or may not be the smoothest storyteller in history. So zip up your imagination and prepare for takeoff. This is the wild and windy tale of the flying trunk. Once upon a time, in a bustling city where the rooftops jostled for a glimpse of the sun and pigeons wore their finest feathers for breakfast, there was a young man with pockets as empty as a forgotten cookie jar. Now, this young man, let's call him Harry, for every good story deserves a hero with a name, wasn't just a fellow of limited means. Oh no, Harry was spectacularly, fabulously, and some might say record-breakingly poor. Yet, Harry owned a spirit richer than all the king's treasuries, and a curiosity twice as high as the tallest tower in town. Harry lived in a tiny room at the very top of a tall, skinny house. From his little window, he could survey a world of possibilities, if only any of them would lend him a crumb or two for breakfast. You see, once upon a time, our Harry had a fine set of clothes, and even fancier friends. But he had spent all his money on joyful things like parties, polite candies, and perhaps a few too many fireworks, until there was nothing left but a single solitary coin, shining so alone it was afraid of the dark. Now, when your wallet is lighter than a feather and your tummy is making the kind of noises you could dance to, you need a proper dose of magic, which is exactly what happened next. One rainy afternoon, so rainy the ducks wore rubber boots, a mysterious old man arrived, with a beard so shaggy you might lose a small squirrel in it, and handed Harry a curious present. A trunk. Not just any trunk, mind you, but a trunk that creaked, groaned, and looked as if it had secrets to tell. Harry, who had just finished counting his imaginary fortune, peered at the trunk from all angles. It was an unusual gift for a young man who needed bread and butter, but sometimes life gives you a trunk when you hope for toast. With a sigh, Harry opened the lid. A whoosh! A whiz! Suddenly, the trunk shook and rattled, and, before Harry could shout, "Hold on to your hat!" It lifted right out the window, taking a very startled Harry with it. Up, 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 they soared through the clouds, while the wind tickled Harry's toes, and the city below became a patchwork quilt stitched by invisible hands. Now, if you've never flown in a trunk, let me give you some advice. Keep your arms and legs inside, always duck for unexpected weather, and whatever you do, don't sneeze. Harry, of course, did all three. The trunk zipped through clouds, did a little loop-the-loop because it was feeling cheeky, and finally landed, plop, in a dazzling land, far away, where even the sand sparkled in the sun and camels napped with their feet crossed. This was no ordinary kingdom. It shimmered with palaces shaped like cupcake towers, fragrant markets bursting with cinnamon, and a princess so clever she could solve a riddle before her morning cheese. But trouble was afoot. The king and queen, splendid in their shiny slippers, had locked their daughter in the highest tower, declaring that only a suitor who could make her laugh would win her hand. A challenge, for she had heard every joke in the royal joke book 3 times over. Harry, trunk still warm beneath him, heard this and grinned. He was, after all, an expert at finding mischief, especially the funny kind. With a bow and a bounce, he was soon invited to meet the royal family. The king, who wore a mustache curvier than a pretzel, welcomed Harry with a plate of pastries and pointed toward the princess, who sat atop her tower, looking bored enough to nap on a hedgehog. Now, you and I might be nervous, but not Harry. He'd flown across oceans in a trunk. Louis Armstrong had nothing on him. Arriving in front of the princess, Harry decided to tell the wildest, wackiest story anyone had ever heard. A story about how socks run away to join the circus, and how teapots can become champions at hopscotch if only you wind them up just right. The princess tilted her head, then her other head. Kidding, she only had one. And suddenly, she giggled, soft as rain at first, then bursting into laughter so hearty that the palace windows rattled, and the royal parrot dropped his monocle in shock. The whole court gasped. The king beamed until his mustache nearly uncorked itself. Harry was immediately declared the winner. There was feasting, dancing, and more cakes than a bakery on its birthday. The trunk, which had developed a personality by now, was awarded a shiny medal for outstanding aerial bravery. But every story, even funny ones, have a hiccup. News spread of Harry's magical flying trunk, and a handful of jealous courtiers decided such a wonderful object should belong to the king. Late one night, while the moon yawned and stars snuggled in their blankets, the mischief makers snuck into Harry's room and stole the trunk, rolling it out into the moonlight and lighting a trail of fireworks so that even the palace pigeons woke up grumpy. When Harry discovered his trunk had vanished, he was, for the very first time, speechless. The princess, seeing her new friend's sadness, called upon the castle's cleverest mice, agents of the Royal Detective Service. They sniffed around, held a brief meeting under a teacup, and soon led Harry to a secret cave where the trunk lounged like a cat, nibbling on an old hat it had found for comfort. With a swoosh and a cheer, Harry was reunited with his flying trunk. But here's the twist. Even as invitations to stay rolled in, Harry realized that adventures come not from treasures or trunks, but from the giggles along the way, and from friends who never tire of one more silly story. So, together with the princess and their trusty trunk, our heroes soared into new adventures, visiting lands where dragons dance, sandwiches sing, and socks still sometimes run away to join the circus. And that, dear listeners, is the curious, cloud-hopping, giggle-popping tale of the flying trunk. A story that reminds us that laughter, kindness, and a little bit of unexpected magic can turn the humdrum into a honey bun. And that, sometimes, the best journeys begin with nothing more than an empty pocket, a curious heart, and a trunk that simply refuses to stay on the ground. So, let's imagine for a moment. If you had a flying trunk, where would you go? Would you zip to the top of a mountain, or tumble through the pyramids, or loop around the moon and wave at the astronauts? Or maybe, just maybe, you'd stop by a lonely rooftop, scoop up someone with a story to tell, and fill the world with another round of laughter. Because, as Harry learned, there's always room for one more adventure, especially if it fits in a flying trunk. Now don't be too surprised if you see a mysterious shape floating among the clouds next time you look up. It could be Harry and his friends, on their way to another wild tale. Or it could be your own imagination, lifting off with a smile, reminding you that magic is never too far away, especially when you're brave enough to laugh, clever enough to dream, and always ready to fly. If you listen closely, you might still hear the echo of the royal princess's laughter, or the whirring shenanigans of a certain magical trunk. And while you may not have a flying trunk of your own, you have something even better. A mind that can travel to any place you wish, fueled by stories, giggles, and the tiniest spark of curiosity. So, tonight, when you settle down to sleep, dream of places you've never seen and friends you've yet to meet. Feel the wind in your hair, the sun tickling your nose, and don't forget to pack your best stories. Because you never know whose day you might brighten when you set off on your very own adventure, trunk or no trunk. And if someone ever asks you how Harry's story really ends, you can smile, nudge them in the ribs, and whisper, "Let's find out together," before setting off, giggling into the great, wide wonder of the world beyond your window. Because, as every storyteller knows, the best adventures are always the ones we share. With friends, with laughter, and with a magic trunk only you can see. So what are you waiting for? Hold tight, take a deep breath, and whoosh, off you go into your next big, silly, glorious adventure. And that's the tale of the flying trunk, the only suitcase in history to cause a royal romance and a royal disaster. If that made you laugh, flap your arms like you're flying and hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Simple Stories, Smart Kids, where silly stories and smart lessons always come with a soft landing. See you next time, little flyers. Until then, stay curious, stay kind, and keep your suitcases on the ground.